Is planning for 2025 something that feels, I don't know, a little bit overwhelming to you? Well, you're not alone. When you got a small team, competing priorities, a freaking gazillion things to do, it's easy to feel like planning and getting organized for the future is a lofty aspiration that a lot of us just don't find time to do. But what if I told you that with the right framework, you can actually cut through the noise and actually set realistic goals that are achievable and will help you realize unbelievable levels of progress? Hi, my name's Littlewood, and in this video, we're going to be talking about how to set effective, actionable goals for 2025 to drive your business forwards. So whether you're running a small e-commerce business or a lean startup, the framework that I wanted to share with you today will allow you to focus on the things that matter most. It will help you leverage your team's strengths and avoid common planning mistakes that waste time and energy. Make sure you stick around to the end because I do have a free resource that you can download that's going to make implementing this process a lot easier. Okay, so before we jump into the actual process, let's talk for a minute about some of the most common reasons that goal setting fails, particularly in smaller teams. And when I say small, I'm talking, companies of less than 10 people or so. The number one reason is that goals are too vague, right? You might say something like, oh, we want to grow revenue by 20% in 2025. That's cool. That's an aspiration, but it's too vague. Like, we don't have any details there in terms of how we're actually going to do that or execute on it. The second big mistake that I see founders make is that their plans do not align with the resources that they have access to. So small teams and early stage founders have very, very limited resources in terms of time, money, and the talent pool that they can draw from. And when you spread yourself too thin, it's usually a recipe for disaster, and you end up with fairly unproductive teams and goals that don't get achieved. The third big mistake is that there's no structure. There's no mechanism around these goals to actually create accountability and know if we're actually making progress on these things. And usually what tends to happen is that the hype will fade out, and by the end of the quarter or year, whatever, most people will have just forgotten about whatever the goal was that we were trying to achieve. So if any of this sounds familiar to you, don't worry, you are not alone. What I'm going to be sharing today is basically a framework that will help get you set up for success and focused on the right projects for 2025. Okay, so the first step in this process is to basically do a brain dump of all of the projects and things that you potentially want to pursue next year in order to grow your company. Don't hold back, all right? There's no filters here, just dump everything onto a piece of paper. So if you were an e-commerce founder, then some of the examples you might have here could be that we want to grow the website sales by optimizing our conversion rate, for example. Or you might say that you want to release a new product line, or perhaps you want to generate 30% more revenue by running more Facebook or Google ads, for example. So what I'm showing you now is actually a couple of examples from my own business, which is a fractional CFO consulting business. As you'll see, I'm planning to grow this YouTube channel in 2025, and I'd also like to release a couple of digital courses to teach early stage founders more about finance. All right. Again, I've got, just a simplified version here. You should ideally have probably 5 or 10 different projects and opportunities once you have completed this step of the process. Okay, so the next step here is to think about the skills or the competencies that you need in order to be successful at each of these projects. So again, taking my own business as an example, one of the things I want to do is release some digital content, i.e. educational courses. So let's think about, what am I going to have in order to be good at that? Well, I need to be able to script and write videos. I need to probably have a graphic designer. I'll need a video editor. I will need to be able to sell and market the content as well. So basically what you want to do is just think through all of the skills and competencies that are required to succeed at each of these projects, and then link them up. So you want to draw lines that link each skill with the project to which it contributes. Now, it's quite likely that one skill is required for more than one project. That's totally fine. You can have as many lines and linkages here as you need. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is basically organize all of this information and ideas. In order to do that, I'm going to introduce you to this very, very simple chart or table. It basically has two axes. On the x-axis, we're looking at your level of competency, i.e. how good you are at a certain skill. On the right-hand side, we've got things that you're very good at. On the left-hand side, we have low levels of competency. The y-axis is all about your enjoyment level. In other words, how much do these tasks energize you and bring you fulfillment? On the top, we have tasks that you really enjoy doing. They make you feel good and give you a lot of energy. At the bottom, we have tasks that you do not get a lot of energy from. Okay, so what you'll notice here is that we now have 4 quadrant. I should mention, by the way, that this concept is something I borrowed from a guy named Sahil Bloom. If you want to learn more about it, then by all means check out his content later. So the first quadrant is the top right. This is what we call your zone of genius. These are tasks that you excel at and you also really, really enjoy spending time on. Needless to say, this is your sweet spot and you're likely to do really, really well if you focus on tasks in this quadrant. The next quadrant is the top left, and this is what we call your hobby zone. These are tasks that you're not currently very good at, but you really enjoy doing. And the interesting thing about tasks that you may not be good at, but enjoy doing, is you're likely to practice them. And if you practice something long enough, there's a good chance that you'll get better at it. So it is not uncommon for something to start in the top left, and with time and practice, it can actually drift over to the top right-hand quadrant and become a zone of genius task. Then on the bottom right, we have what we call the danger zone. And these are tasks that don't really bring you a whole lot of joy. You might be good at them, however, and what that means is that they're often really good candidates for training somebody else. So if you have a high level of competency, but you don't enjoy it, you should probably be showing someone else on the team how to do that thing. And ideally, that is something that they get more enjoyment from than you do. The fourth zone here is what we call the doomed zone. These are tasks that you don't enjoy, you're not good at, and let's be honest, you're probably not going to make a whole lot of progress for any tasks or projects that fall in this quadrant. My advice to you is don't put too much time and energy into tackling these. Not to say that you can never do them, but perhaps just look at re-evaluating them or, putting them on the back burner for a while until such time in the future where you have someone who is actually good at or enjoys doing these sorts of tasks. Okay, so step 3 in this process is to basically prioritize all of these tasks or skills into their quadrant. And this is, where this tasks get really fun. So as you can see, I've kind of reorganized everything here, and I've basically dragged these different skills and competencies into the quadrants that make sense for me personally. Now, my recommendation is that when you're doing this, you actually have everyone on your team create their own version of this chart, because what you want to figure out here is how you are going to distribute the work and ideally put everything in somebody's zone of genius or zone of hobby. So again, going back to this example of my own fractional CFO consulting business, the nice thing about this project or priority I have around getting 4 more retainer clients is that it allows me to spend a lot of time doing things that are in my zone of genius. Now, I'm not particularly great at sales, and neither do I particularly enjoy the sales function. So I clearly need to find some sort of solution to that problem if I am going to achieve this priority of getting 4 more retainer clients, right? Similarly, when you look at the goals that I have around the YouTube channel and the digital products or the course that I mentioned here, there are parts of that I like doing and that I enjoy doing, but I'll let you in on a little secret. I am not the one editing this video right now. I've got someone who's doing it that is much better at it than I am. And that means that I can spend more of my time functioning and operating in my zone of genius. So what I hope you'll see here or be able to identify is that by clearly defining the scope, the resources, and the costs involved with all of this, I've built a realistic, actionable plan that basically aligns with my strengths. It's given me clarity on the things that I can do myself myself and the things that I can probably do quite well. It's also made it very clear where I have shortcomings. Like, where are the areas where I need to either be hiring someone or getting some help in order to achieve these goals. So I just wanted to share with you, since we're here, I guess an anecdote or a real life example of how a framework like this is been applied to my own life in business. Before I was doing this CFO stuff, I was actually running an e-commerce business, which we started in 2017 niche. So a kind of gardening lifestyle type brand, right? Now, back then there were a lot of other gardening brands who were really taking off on Instagram and doing a really good job with the direct to consumer model. The playbook was, pretty standardized, right? They would have these awesome Instagram accounts with all these amazing photos that have this really cool brand, and they would drive traffic with the help of, their content creators and influencers, whatever, to their e-commerce store. And that was how they were making, a lot of sales. My co-founder and I at the time were in this similar industry, but we're both engineers, and candidly, neither of us really has a branding or marketing bone in our bodies. I don't mind dabbling in this sort of stuff, but I wouldn't claim I'm particularly good at it. And so we recognized in ourselves that that was a game that we were probably not going to be that successful at or competitive at. And so we said, you know what? We need to think a little bit differently about the projects that we prioritize here in order to find things that better align with our skills and competencies. Now, like I said, both engineers, we like numbers, we like data. And for any of you that have ever sold on Amazon, you'll be aware that there is an abundance of that on that platform. So we quite intentionally said, listen, if we're going to build a successful business here, then we should be focusing on Amazon as a platform because it much better aligns with our skills and competencies as a small team, right? Now, that's not to say that we said no to Shopify and direct to consumer indefinitely, right? We just said, right now, with the skills and resources that we have at our disposal, this is not something that makes sense for us. So that's just a little anecdote to show how this framework can be applied in terms of setting and thinking about your full year goals. Okay, so if you've made it this far, I expect that one of the questions rattling around in your head is, okay, this is cool, but what now? What do I do with all this? Well, in a video that's going to be coming out very soon, it'll be up here once it's released, we're going to be talking about the objectives and key results framework, or the OKR framework. And this is a really, really effective tool for getting laser focused on your priorities and also putting in place the accountability and the systems to track and record your progress. So check out that video as a next step. Okay, so I hope I've convinced you in this video that goal setting doesn't need to be overwhelming or complicated. If you follow this 4-step framework that I've outlined here, which basically involves dumping all of your priorities on a sheet of paper, thinking through the skills or competencies that you need in order to be successful at these projects, then organizing each of these skills into the 4 quadrants, and what you're looking for is skills or inputs that are in your zone of genius or zone of hobby. Hopefully, what you've come up with is a clearer picture of the goals that are going to be realistic for your team, where you can have more impact and you are likely to drive more success for you and your company. And if you're ready to have a go at actually putting this in action, then head down to the link below to download the free workbook that I've put together for you. It includes a bunch of templates, guides, a few extra resources that we haven't included in the video to basically make this whole process a lot easier for you guys. And if you are interested in more content about how to implement your priorities, projects, goals, and actually make meaningful progress on growing your e-commerce or CPG business, then make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because I've got a bunch more content coming out in early 2025 that's going to focus specifically on this topic. Anyway, that's it for today, guys. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll catch you next time.